Well, hello, welcome to the Code RX blog and podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode. Now, this is the blog and podcast created exclusively for web design and content creation professionals. Now, my name is Candy, and I'm going to be the host for today's episode. And this podcast and blog was created by and is sponsored by Creative Designs by CCW, a full-service web design, SEO, and social media company. Now, in today's episode, we are going to be discussing Ruby on Rails. So sit back, relax, go get that coffee and tea and whatever it is that you're sipping on today, and let's dive deep into Ruby on Rails. Right, so now let's just start with the basics of Ruby on Rails. Exactly what is it? First of all, Ruby on Rails is often simply called Rails, and it's a popular open source web application framework written in Ruby, which is a dynamic and object-oriented programming language. Now, Rails follows the Model View Controller, or MVC, architectural pattern, which separates the application's data, logic, and presentation layers. Now, Ruby was developed in 2004 by David Heinemeier Hansson, and it gained widespread adoption due to its emphasis on convention over configuration, which means it provides defaults for many aspects of the development process, reducing the need for repetitive code and speeding up the development process. Rails includes many built-in features for streamlining web development, and we're going to touch on a lot of those features in this video, but some would be automated testing and scaffolding for quick generating boilerplate code, and a powerful ORM, or object relational mapping, called Active Record for interacting with databases. Now, overall, Ruby on Rails is known for its simplicity, productivity, and elegant code, making it a popular choice for building web applications of various scales and complexities. Okay, so next, now we said that Ruby on Rails, or what's simply called Rails, is basically a framework that is written in Ruby. So let's talk about what Ruby is before we go a little bit deeper into Ruby on Rails. Now, first of all, Ruby is a dynamic, reflective, object-oriented programming language that was developed in the mid-1990s in Japan. Now, it's gained popularity worldwide since then for its simplicity and productivity. Again, Ruby is known for its elegant syntax, and it emphasizes readability and programmer happiness with a focus on human-friendly code. Now, some of the key features of Ruby include it's object-oriented. Everything in Ruby is an object, even primitive data types. So this makes it easy to work with and manipulate the data. Also, dynamic typing is a key feature of Ruby. Since it's dynamically typed, that means you don't need to declare the type of a variable. This allows for more flexibility, but can also lead to runtime errors if it's not handled carefully. Another feature is garbage collection. Ruby manages memory automatically through garbage collection, making memory management easier for developers. Also, blocks and closures are a key feature of Ruby. Ruby has powerful support for blocks and closures, which allows for flexible and expressive programming patterns. Another key feature for Ruby would be the libraries and frameworks. Ruby has a rich ecosystem of libraries and frameworks, including Ruby on Rails, which we're going to talk about in this video, for web development, which has played a significant role in the language's popularity. Overall, Ruby is often praised for its developer-friendly syntax, which prioritizes simplicity and readability, making it an excellent choice for both beginners and experienced programmers alike. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the basic components of Ruby on Rails, or Rails. Now again, we already said that this is a web application framework and it's written in Ruby. So here are some of the basic components. Ruby, as we discussed, is the programming language itself, which provides the foundation for Rails. Rails refers to the framework built on top of Ruby. Now, it follows, again, the Model View Controller, MVC, architectural pattern. Model represents the data of the application. It interacts with the database, handling data manipulation, validation, and business logic. Models are typically implemented as Ruby classes. Then there is the view. View deals with the presentation layer of the application. It generates the HTML to be displayed to the user, often utilizing embedded Ruby or ERB or other templating engines to dynamically render content. Another component is the controller. This acts as an intermediary between the model and view. It receives requests from the web server, then interacts with the model to retrieve data and passes that data to the view for rendering. Controllers are implemented as Ruby classes. Then there is the roots. Roots define the URL endpoints, or routes you might say, define the URL endpoints of the application and map them to specific controller actions. These roots or routes are configured in the config routes.rb or routes.rb file. Helpers, those are utility methods that assist in generating views, often used for tasks like formatting data or generating HTML elements. Another component would be assets. The assets consist of JavaScript, CSS, and image files used to enhance the user interface of the application. Rails provides asset pipeline features for managing and serving these assets efficiently. Next would be the database. Rails supports various database systems, including SQLite, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and others. It provides an object relational mapping, or ORM, layer through Active Record, which simplifies database interactions by mapping database tables to Ruby objects and providing methods for querying and manipulating the data. Another component would be middleware. Middleware intercepts HTTP requests and responses, allowing for additional processing to be performed before or after they reach the application. Rails includes middleware for features like session management, request logging, and more. Now, all of these components work together to provide a structured and efficient framework for building web applications in Ruby. All right, now before you create a Ruby on Rails project, there's a few things that you're going to want to do to get started. I would like to give you some resources and tell you where to go, how to find guides to getting Ruby installed, and also to maybe if you need it, if you're not familiar with the Ruby programming language, I'll share with you the website that you can go to basically go into a more detailed tutorial before you begin your work with Ruby and with Ruby on Rails. First of all, you want to go to rubyonrails.org. There you're going to find everything that you need to get started, everything from more links to talking about and learning the official Ruby programming language. There's going to be lists of programming books that you can order, some that you can download, and also you're going to see step-by-step guides to get you started with installing Rails, creating new applications, and even connecting your application to a database. Now, when the first thing that you're going to do after you go through this website, get a little bit more familiar, and you're ready to start trying to create your own project, you're going to have to install Rails. And if you go to guides.rubyonrails.org. There you're going to see a comprehensive step-by-step guide to help you to install Ruby on Rails. Now also, there are some other tools that can help you to quickly install Ruby and Ruby on Rails on your system. You can use a Rails installer, and for Mac users, there is an installer for you as well. So again, you're going to find all of that information on rubyonrails.org, and then the guides are on guides.rubyonrails.org. So now that we've discussed that, if you have already come to the point where you've installed Ruby on Rails on your system, I thought I would demonstrate for you just how you can create some basic applications using Ruby on Rails. All right, so before we get into creating our first Ruby on Rails application, let's just do a little review of what we've covered so far. So we started out by covering exactly what Ruby on Rails is. And we know now that Ruby is often also referred to as Rails, and that it is a popular open source web application framework that is written on Ruby. Now we've talked about what Ruby is, and we know that Ruby is a dynamic and object-oriented programming language. We've covered some of the basic components of Ruby on Rails, and then we reviewed where we can find our documentation to help us get started with Rails as well as Ruby, and where we can go to download the installation files that we're going to need to install Ruby as well as Ruby on Rails on our system. Now that we've done that, let's go ahead and create a simple example of Ruby on Rails code by creating a basic to-do list application. So first, we're going to use the following code to create a new Rails application. Now we're going to type Rails new to-do _list_app cd to-do _list_app. Then let's generate a scaffold for our task model, which will represent the task in our to-do list. We're going to type the following code: Rails generate scaffold task title : string description, text, completed, Boolean. Now this will generate the necessary files for our task model, including a migration file to create the task table in the database and a controller with basic CRUD actions. Now CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. So next, we need to run the migration to create the task table in the database. We do that by typing the following code, Rails db migrate. Now let's define the routes or the routes for our application by typing open config /roots.rb and then add the following code, rails.application.roots.draw do. Then resources, task, then root, then in parentheses you want task, # index, and then type end. This sets up the routes for our task resource and sets the index action of the task controller as the route. Now let's modify the app views task index.html.erb file to display the list of tasks. And then this is our code. Now, once we're done with this code, this will display a table of tasks with options to show, edit, and delete each task, as well as a link to create a new task. Now that's our first very simple example of Ruby on Rails code for a basic to-do list application. All right, so now let's go ahead and take a step back and just do a step-by-step tutorial to make sure you've covered all the bases so that you can start working with Ruby on Rails. So step 1, you're going to need to install Ruby. You have to ensure that you've installed Ruby on your system before you can install Rails. Now, and you want to install it using a version manager like RVM or RBENV. Now, I've given you some resources where you can go, and I suggest going to rubyonrails.org, also guides.rubyonrails.org. You're going to find everything that you need to get started. You'll find links to where you can go and download Ruby, and also the Ruby Gems packaging system, which is installed with Ruby by default. You're going to find pretty much every resource that you need to help you learn the Ruby programming language, including a list of free programming books that are going to be very helpful. And then, now once you've done that, you can go ahead and install Rails. And you do that by typing the following command, gem install Rails. Now, once that's done, you can then create your new Rails application. Do that by typing the following command, Rails new my app. Next, you're going to want to navigate to your app directory so that you can begin to work with your newly created Rails application. Do that by typing cd for change directory space my app. So now that that's done, you want to go ahead and create or generate a model and a scaffold. Now, you generate a model by creating a simple model, and this is where I would start just to give you the basics. Create a simple model called product with attributes, name, and price, and then run the following command. Rails generate model product name string price float. Next, generate your scaffold. Now the scaffold will create the CRUD. Remember, that's the create, that stands for create, read, update, and delete functionality for our run model. And that code would look like this. Rails generate scaffold _ controller product. Next, run migrations. Apply the migrations to your database with this code, Rails db : migrate. Now, step 3, you're going to implement the views. Now, you do that by updating roots first with open config /roots.rb, and then make sure you have a root for your products resource. And it should look like this: resources products. Then create the views. Rails scaffolding has already generated views for us, but you can customize them further if needed. And views are located in the app /views /products directory. Now, go ahead and test your application. Start the server, launch the Rails server with Rails server. Then you want to visit your application. Open the web browser and go to http://localhost:3000 /products to see your application in action. Now, step 5, you want to add validation and styling. You can add validation by opening app models products.rb and then by adding validation rules for your model attributes. Now, this is an example of adding the model attributes validation rules and what that code would look like. Then you want to add styling. Use CSS frameworks like Bootstrap to custom CSS to style your views and make your application visually appealing. Now, step 6, you'll want to deploy your application. So you want to choose a deployment platform to deploy your Rails application. Then you want to follow deployment instructions. Each platform has its own deployment process, so follow the instructions provided by your chosen platform to deploy your Rails app. Then lastly, test your deployed app. Once deployed, you can test your application on the live server to ensure that everything is working as expected. And that's it. You've successfully built and deployed a simple Ruby on Rails application. And from here and from this point, you can continue to enhance it by adding more features, authentication, and any other functionality that you desire. Okay, so there you have it. In just a few minutes' time, we've reviewed everything from what Ruby on Rails is, to what Ruby is, some of the basic components of Ruby on Rails, and then how to get started with Ruby on Rails. We've reviewed how to create a simple to-do list, and then we've gone step by step on what we'll need to do to build and deploy our first application. Now, there's so much more. I mean, we basically just scratched the surface of, what Rails can do and just, how to work with Rails itself. So again, I hope that you'll go and visit the site that I gave you, which is rubyonrails.org. It's a great site for anyone, whether you're, experienced or not. It's going to show you, again, how to install Rails, how to create new Rails applications, how to connect your application to a database, and more. And then also, it's going to cover some things that we didn't have time to really cover in detail in this video, such as the model view controller principles and things like that. So again, I hope you'll go and visit that site today. Now, again, I want to thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this useful. Make sure that you visit our blog, which is thecoderxblog.com, as well as Creative Designs by ccw.com. That is the web design company that is sponsoring these videos. And if you haven't done so already, I hope that you will hit the subscribe button today. Make sure that you go over and follow us on LinkedIn. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, you name it. I'll leave links to all of those locations and all of our social media and websites down in the description box. Thanks again, and I hope to see you next time on the Code RX blog and podcast.